The first time Juliet kissed my best friend, she did it beneath the stained glass window of my bookshop, in front of 37 people who had come to celebrate me. I remember the number because I had counted the cups before the launch party, terrified I would run out of cider, terrified nobody would come, terrified my little shop would look as small and foolish as my ex always made it sound when she said it was charming. The bent page had survived 2 floods, one landlord with a taste for cruelty, and my own habit of spending rent money on first editions with cracked spines. That night, it was supposed to be proof that I had not been ridiculous to fight for it. I had hung winter garlands along the shelves, borrowed chairs from the cafe next door, and written little place cards for the local writers who had agreed to read. Juliet arrived late in a cream coat, her dark hair shining like she had never once cried over unpaid invoices beside me at 2 in the morning. And Sarah came in behind her wearing the emerald earrings I had given her on her 30th birthday. My best friend smiled at me with lipstick on her teeth, and I thought stupidly that grief must have been making me paranoid because why would betrayal look so ordinary? Juliet waited until after my speech. Of course she did. She waited until the room had applauded, until the city arts director had said the bent page was becoming a rare sanctuary for neighborhood culture, until I had smiled so hard my face hurt. Then she stepped forward and said, "There's something we should say before rumors say it for us. We." That was the first knife. Not I, not she. We. Sarah's hand moved to Juliet's sleeve, and the second knife arrived before either of them spoke. The room changed around me. People became careful with their glasses. Someone stopped laughing in the poetry aisle. My assistant, June, froze behind the counter with a tray of ginger cookies in her hands. Juliet looked at me then, not with shame, but with the tender exhaustion of a woman who had already forgiven herself for harming me. "Claire and I have been over for a long time," she said, in that smooth voice she used when persuading donors and dinner hosts. "Emotionally, anyway. I know this is difficult, but Sarah and I didn't plan to fall in love." The third knife was the word love, placed gently on the table as if it had not been stolen out of my own house. Sarah whispered, "Clara, please." And I wanted to laugh, because please was what people said when they still expected you to help them hurt you more neatly. I had loved Sarah before I loved Juliet. Not romantically, but in the old trusting way of women who share bad apartments and worse wine, who hold each other's hair back after heartbreak, who learn the names of each other's dead grandmothers. Sarah had sat on the floor with me when my mother sold the last of our family books to pay a hospital bill. She had known I kept emergency cash in a tea tin above the travel memoirs. She had known which mornings I woke ashamed of wanting more than survival. She knew where to press because I had handed her the map. "You chose the event tonight?" I asked. My voice sounded calm in a way that made the nearest people lean closer. "You thought my anniversary party was the right place?" Juliet's mouth tightened. "We didn't want to lie anymore." "No," I said. "You just wanted an audience." Sarah flinched. Juliet did not. She had been raised in rooms where the person who stayed composed got the story. Her family owned half the city's glossy magazines, 3 old houses on the water, and a foundation that funded art as long as the art knew how to behave. Juliet had inherited that skill, the ability to make selfishness sound like emotional maturity. "Please don't punish Sarah," she said softly. "This has been hard on her, too." Something inside me went very cold. I looked at Sarah, at the earrings, at her trembling mouth, and realized she had dressed carefully for my humiliation. Not consciously, perhaps. People rarely call themselves cruel while picking jewelry. But she had known there would be photographs. She had known everyone would remember how elegant she looked, while I stood behind my own counter with cider on my sleeve and my heart knocked loose. "Hard on her," I repeated. A few people looked away. Cowards, I thought. Though later I would understand that cowardice is often just comfort refusing to be inconvenienced. Juliet stepped closer, lowering her voice enough to pretend kindness. "Clara, you're making this worse for yourself." There it was. the final stamp on the story. If I cried, I was unstable. If I shouted, I was bitter. If I stood still, I was pathetic. If I left, I proved I could not handle the truth. So I did the only thing that belonged to me. I took the glass of cider from my own counter, lifted it slightly toward them, and said, "To honesty then, may it find you eventually." Then I walked out of my shop while everyone watched me leave the room I had built. Rain had turned the alley behind the bent page into black glass. I stood beneath the fire escape, breathing like someone had locked me in a trunk. Inside, I heard June's voice rise, sharp and furious, then the murmur of people pretending to help by not following me. My dress clung to my knees. My hands shook so badly I could not light the cigarette I had not smoked in 6 years. I threw it into a puddle and laughed once, because even my vices had become decorative. That was the night my shop became a rumor. In the weeks after, people came in with soft voices and curious eyes. Some bought books they did not want, so they could look at me kindly. Others stopped coming altogether because Juliet's circle had decided I was dramatic, and drama was bad for wine receptions. Sarah sent one message. It said, "I never wanted to take anything from you." I did not answer. There was no answer to give that would not cost me more. By February, the shop smelled of wet coats, old paper, and debt. I opened every morning because books are unsentimental creatures. They do not care that your girlfriend left you for the woman who helped you choose the paint for the front door. They wait to be shelved. They gather dust. They allow strangers to walk in and ask whether you have that one novel with the blue cover. I was closing late on a Thursday when I found the bride. At first, I thought she was a display. That is how exhausted I was. The back corner of the shop, where the rare poetry lived in a mahogany case, had been dim except for one green reading lamp. Snow tapped at the front windows. The floorboards creaked under my boots. I had just counted the register and discovered I was $62 short of dignity when I saw a spill of white silk beneath the ladder. A dress, a veil, one bare shoulder. A hand curled around the edge of a book as if the person attached to it had fallen asleep mid-sentence. I did not scream. I made a sound more embarrassing than a scream, somewhere between a kettle and a mouse, and grabbed the brass letter opener from the counter because apparently I believed I could defend myself with office supplies. The woman on the floor opened her eyes. I knew her before she sat up. Everyone in the city knew Adrienne Vale. Not intimately, of course. Adrienne was not the kind of woman people knew. She appeared in business profiles, foundation photographs, and rumors delivered in careful whispers. Juliet's older sister, the serious one, the one who ran Vale House after their father's stroke, the one who could end a grant with one email and make a banker sweat by saying nothing at all. She was 38 perhaps, with black hair falling loose from what had once been an elegant bridal chignon, pale skin marked by fatigue, and eyes the severe gray of winter rivers. A diamond necklace lay crooked at her throat. Her wedding dress, which must have cost more than my annual rent, was torn at the hem and dusted with the sorrow of my bookshop floor. She blinked at the letter opener in my hand. "If you stab me, Miss Rowe, aim away from the bodice, it's borrowed." The absurdity of that sentence made fear give way to anger. "Why are you sleeping in my shop?" Adrienne looked around slowly, as if confirming the shelves had not been a dream. "Because every hotel I own knows my face. Every car I use can be tracked. And this was the only place in the city I could think of where people still respect silence." You broke in. The alley door was unlatched. It was not. It was unlatched enough. That is not a category. A small, exhausted crease touched her mouth. Not a smile. Something older and sadder. Then I apologized for committing a nuanced trespass. I lowered the letter opener an inch. "You're Juliet's sister." I have been trying to recover from that fact for years. I should have thrown her out. I had rehearsed fury toward every member of the Vale family so often it had become part of my morning routine. But Adrienne was barefoot in a wedding dress, shivering so hard the diamonds at her throat trembled, and there was blood on the side of one heel where the skin had torn. Not much. Enough. What happened? I asked. Her gaze sharpened. Are you asking because you care, or because you want a better reason not to call the police? Both. Practical. I own a bookshop. Practicality is all I have left after romantic judgment failed. That time she almost smiled. Then her eyes moved to the front window, beyond the dark shelves to the snow. I ran from my wedding. You were getting married tonight? Apparently not. To whom? A merger in a tuxedo. I stared. That is either very poetic or extremely rich. Both, unfortunately. She pushed herself upright and winced. For a moment the severe Adrian veil vanished, replaced by a woman in pain trying not to show it. The instinct to help rose before I could stop it, treacherous and human. I set the letter opener down and held out my hand. She looked at it like an unfamiliar contract. I'm not going to bite you, I said. No, she replied, taking my hand. You seem more likely to quote something fatal first. Her fingers were cold, the kind of cold that gets into bone. I helped her to the worn velvet chair by the fireplace, the one with the sagging left arm that old Mr. Halpern used every Saturday to read mysteries he never bought. Adrian sat with astonishing grace for someone who had been found on the floor. The dress arranged itself around her like a defeated cloud. I locked the front door, checked the alley door, and returned with the wool blanket I kept for drafty evenings. She watched every movement. Not suspicious exactly. Trained. As if life had taught her that even kindness required terms. Tea? I asked. I don't want to impose. You are already a runaway bride in my poetry section. We left ordinary imposition several exits ago. Tea then. In the tiny back room, my kettle screamed while my hands shook. I wanted to call June. I wanted to call no one. I wanted Juliet to know her untouchable sister had landed in my ruined little shop, and that I, the dramatic ex, was the person holding the blanket. I hated that thought because it was petty and because it comforted me. When I returned, Adrian had removed the necklace and laid it on the side table like a dead snake. Her veil sat in her lap. Without the jewelry, she looked younger and more dangerous. Less like a bride, more like someone who had survived being dressed as one. I handed her the tea. Do I need to worry about someone coming here? Yes, I stopped. That was not the reassuring answer. I try not to lie when frightened. You're frightened? She looked up at me. Of course. Nobody had ever said of course like that, as if fear were not a weakness, but an entry on an honest inventory. I sat across from her on the stepladder because the other chair was buried beneath boxes of unsorted donations. Who are you running from? My mother, my board, my fiancé's security, 3 gossip columnists, and possibly a priest, though he was the least motivated. She wrapped both hands around the mug. Not from the man himself. He seemed relieved when I left. That sounds like a terrible wedding. It was an excellent production. The vows were the problem. Why here? Adrian's gaze moved toward the shelves. When Juliet and I were girls, our nanny used to bring us to this street. There was a different shop here then, before yours. I remember sitting in the back corner and thinking nobody could ask anything of me while I was holding a book. Years later, when you opened the bent page, Juliet complained that you had made the space too earnest. I began ordering from you out of spite. I blinked. The monthly anonymous first edition orders. Vale Foundation Cultural Acquisitions. That was you? Yes. You bought a signed Jeanette Winterson through an assistant named M. Finch. M. Finch is very discreet. M. Finch overpaid. I was aware. I should have been offended. Instead, an unexpected warmth moved through my chest. Those orders had saved payroll twice. They had arrived when I thought the shop would fold. Why didn't you tell me? Because Juliet was dating you. And I had no right to enjoy the place where my sister was learning to be less shallow. A laugh broke out of me before I could contain it. Adrian looked startled by it. then almost pleased, which was worse. I wrapped my arms around myself. She did not learn. No, Adrian said quietly. She did not. The room changed. Juliet entered without entering, as she always did now. Adrian set her mug down with care. I saw what happened at your anniversary event. My throat tightened. Were you there? Briefly. I arrived late and left after. Without saying anything. Yes. The hurt arrived fast, stupidly sharp. Of course. Another veil watching from a warm room. Adrian absorbed that without flinching. Yes. I expected a defense. She offered none. Why didn't you stop her? Because by the time I understood what they intended, the harm had already happened. Because I told myself intervening would make you more humiliated. Because I am excellent at decisive action in boardrooms, and slower than I should be with human pain. Her mouth tightened. Because I failed you. The directness took my anger's footing away. I looked down at my hands. You didn't owe me anything. That is not the same as being innocent. Outside, snow thickened against the windows. The shop lights hummed. Adrian Vale, runaway bride and secret buyer of my most expensive books, sat wrapped in my wool blanket while the city likely searched penthouses and ballrooms for her. I should have asked her to leave then, before the shape of my life tilted again. Instead, I said, "You can sleep upstairs until morning." Her eyes lifted to mine. No, it's a bed, not a trap. No, she repeated quieter. If I stay, they will find out. They will put your name beside mine, and your shop has already survived enough of my family's appetite. The care in that sentence irritated me more than the refusal. Do not make noble choices in my building without consulting me. Something flashed in her eyes. Interest, perhaps. Recognition. You're right. I am. Yes, I dislike it too. Then be quiet and take the bed. I can't take your bed. I'm not offering it because I'm generous. I'm offering it because if you collapse in my chair and die, the paperwork will be unbearable. Adrienne stared at me. Then she laughed. It was low, brief, and so unexpected that the whole shop seemed to exhale. Miss Rowe, she said, you are much crueler than your reputation suggests. My reputation was written by cowards. Yes, she said, it was. That was how Adrienne Vale spent her wedding night in the narrow bed above my bookshop, while I sat downstairs in the velvet chair with a brass letter opener on my lap, watching snow cover the street and wondering how a woman could look so cold and still leave warmth behind. By morning, the city knew the bride had vanished. By noon, it knew she had been seen leaving a small bookshop near Briar Lane in a borrowed navy coat that belonged to a woman her sister had once betrayed. There was a photograph, of course. There is always a photograph when you most need invisibility. A delivery driver had caught Adrienne stepping into a black car I did not recognize. Hair loose, white dress hidden badly under my coat. The headline did not say runway executive or failed merger. It said heiress bride flees to sister's ex. June arrived with coffee and murder in her eyes. You have a type. I do not. Terrifying rich women who arrive during weather. That has happened once. Once is enough for a pattern if it's dramatic. She slapped a tablet on the counter. Please explain why Adrienne Vale looks like she spent the night upstairs. She did spend the night upstairs. June closed her eyes. I was hoping for a less legally interesting answer. Nothing happened. I know. You are tragically responsible at inconvenient times. I should have been embarrassed. I was. But beneath that, another feeling moved restlessly. Adrienne had left at dawn after receiving a call from a woman whose voice cut through the ceiling even without speakerphone. She had come downstairs wearing my coat over the ruined dress, face restored to its public severity. At the door, she had paused. I will keep them from your shop, she said. You don't have to manage me. I am not managing you. I am attempting to repair the consequences of having appeared here in bridal couture. You make it sound like a plumbing leak. It is messier. Adrienne. Her name in my mouth startled both of us. For a second, the formality between us slipped. She looked tired, almost young, almost reachable. Thank you, she said. For the bed? For not asking me to explain before allowing me to be tired. Then she was gone, and the shop felt larger in the worst way. By evening, Vale House sent a statement that Adrienne had postponed the wedding for private family reasons. The word postponed did a lot of labor. Juliet texted me for the first time in 6 weeks. What did you do? I stared at the message until my coffee went cold, then handed the phone to June. June typed, "She offered tea, which is more than your family deserves." I snatched the phone back. "We are not sending that." Coward. No business owner. I did not answer Juliet. That was answer enough. For 3 days, reporters loitered outside the bent page, pretending to care about secondhand books. Customers came in with wide eyes and bought cheap paperbacks as admission to my life. June made a sign that said, "No bridal commentary unless purchasing hardcover," which I removed after 2 hours because it increased commentary by 40%. Adrienne did not come back. She sent a lawyer. Her name was Maribel Cross, a compact woman with silver glasses and the emotional temperature of marble. She arrived before opening with a cream folder, introduced herself, and asked if we could speak privately. June refused to leave the counter and cleaned the same mug for 12 minutes, listening with her whole body. "Ms. Vale asked me to deliver these documents," Maribel said. "A cease and desist template for press harassment, a security assessment for your back entrance, and a proposal." "I don't need security." "Your alley door disagrees." I glared. She slid the folder forward. Inside was a contract offering to fund a restoration of the Rare Books Room, a 3-month paid collaboration between the Bent Page and the Vale Literacy Foundation, and a clause specifying that all decisions regarding the shop remained mine. The money was absurd. Not billionaire absurd, but bookshop saving absurd. I read the number 3 times. "She thinks I can be bought?" I asked. Maribel's expression did not change. "Ms. Vale specifically said you would say that." "Oh, did she?" "She also said to tell you the proposal is not an apology, not charity, and not leverage. It is damage control with fair compensation and no requirement that you like her." June whispered, "I like her." I did not look back. Why doesn't she come say this herself? Because every photographer in the city is waiting for her to stand near you, and Ms. Vale said you should not have to pay for her visibility twice. I hated how much that sounded like her. I hated more that I understood it. I closed the folder. "Tell Ms. Vale she can come after closing if she wants an answer." Maribel paused. "She may not think that wise." "Then tell her wisdom is not in the contract." Adrienne came at 10 that night through the front door, after the last customer left, and after June dramatically announced she would be nearby in case of murder, seduction, or contract fraud. Adrienne wore black trousers, a dark green coat, and no trace of wedding except the pale mark on her neck where the necklace had rubbed. She looked less exhausted and more dangerous, which annoyingly suited her. "Miss Rowe," she said. "Ms. Vale." Her mouth moved. "We have retreated." "To formality? Yes, it seems safer." "For whom?" I folded my arms. "Probably both of us." The shop was quiet around us. Rain replaced snow, ticking against the windows. The green lamp cast half her face in shadow. She looked at the folder on the counter. Maribel was clear. Maribel is a terrifying document with a pulse. That is why I employ her. Is the money guilt? Partly. At least you're honest. Not always. I am trying. That sentence caught me. Not because it was grand, because it was not. Adrienne Vale admitting effort felt more intimate than someone else declaring devotion. "What happened at the wedding?" I asked. She glanced toward the locked door. "The short version." "The true one." She was silent long enough that I thought she might refuse. Then she removed her gloves and placed them on the counter. My father built Vale House as a family business and called it legacy whenever he wanted obedience. After his stroke, the board began treating me as a temporary inconvenience. They agreed to keep me as chief executive if I secured a merger with Hartwell Media. The merger came with a groom. You agreed to marry someone for a board vote. I agreed to perform stability. That is not an answer. No, her eyes met mine. I agreed because I was tired, because being the eldest daughter in a family that praises sacrifice is a slow education in disappearing, because my sister creates disasters, and my mother calls me to clean them, because everyone I trusted told me one more compromise would buy me freedom later, and because I have made a career out of mistaking control for choice. The words sank between us. I thought of her asleep on my floor, veil tangled in her hand. What changed? I was standing at the altar, and the officiant asked whether I came freely. She looked down at her bare ring finger. I realized I did not know what freely felt like anymore. Then I thought of your shop. My shop. A place full of endings people chose to keep. Her gaze moved over the shelves. And I walked out. I did not know what to do with the tenderness that rose in me. It felt unwelcome and inevitable, like dawn through curtains. Adrienne, if you accept the collaboration, it will be real, she said quickly, as if worried she had said too much. Your rare books room needs structural work. The foundation needs a public project not tied to my aborted wedding. We both benefit. Clean, practical, no feelings. That would be easiest. Is easiest what you want? Her eyes sharpened. The silence became charged enough that I heard the rain harder. No, she said. One word, barely spoken. It changed the temperature of the room. Then the bell above the door rang, even though the door was locked. Juliet stood outside in a red coat, one hand pressed to the glass, fury shining through the rain behind her. For one ridiculous second, all three of us stayed still, arranged like a painting of poor decisions. Adrienne's face closed. Do not open it, she said. She has keys to this neighborhood's gossip. The door is not the danger. Clara. There it was again, my name without armor. I looked at her. I am not hiding in my own shop. I unlocked the door. Juliet swept in smelling of expensive perfume and storm. Her eyes moved from Adrienne to me, then back. So it's true. Lovely to see you too, I said. Juliet ignored me. Do you have any idea what you've done? Adrienne's voice was calm. Clarify whether you're addressing the woman you betrayed or the sister whose wedding you plan to enjoy as a networking opportunity. Juliet's face flushed. You humiliated the family. No, Adrienne said. I disrupted a transaction. With her. Juliet pointed at me, and something old and sharp twisted in my stomach. You ran to Clara? Adrienne's stillness became lethal. Lower your hand. Juliet lowered it, perhaps before she meant to. Then she laughed, brittle and cruel. Oh, that is rich. Clara, do you understand? She collects broken things, causes, scandals, women who look grateful when she fixes their lives. Don't confuse being useful to Adrienne with being wanted. The words struck too close to fears I had not admitted. My face went hot. Adrienne did not move, but the air around her changed. Leave, she said. Juliet looked pleased. You see? Commanding already. I stepped forward. My heart hammered, but my voice held. No, I'm telling you to leave. Not because Adrienne said it. Because you don't get to walk into my shop and define another woman's care after what you called love. Juliet stared at me. She had expected tears, perhaps. Or bitterness. Not this. Clara, No. You used this room to make your betrayal look honest. You do not get a second performance. Sarah appeared behind the glass, soaked and pale. She had followed Juliet. Of course. Her eyes found mine, and guilt moved across her face with the familiarity of an old coat. "Clara," she said through the door. I looked at my former best friend and felt, not forgiveness, not even anger exactly, but the strange dull ache of something that had lost its shape. "Not tonight," I said. Juliet left because there was no audience left inside. Sarah lingered a second longer, then followed. When I locked the door again, my hands shook. Adrienne noticed but did not reach for me. "Are you all right?" she asked. "No." "What do you need?" The question broke something softer than pain. Not, "What should I do?" Not, "How can I fix this?" Not, "Why are you upset?" "What do you need?" I leaned back against the door, breathing through the ache. "Tea," I said eventually. "And for everyone with the last name Vale to stop appearing after closing." Adrienne exhaled. "Tea, I can manage. The second may require litigation." That was the night I signed the collaboration contract. It would be a lie to say the work brought us together slowly. It brought us together with the relentless efficiency of old buildings, legal schedules, and public curiosity. The rare books room had to be emptied, assessed, reinforced, and cataloged. Adrienne insisted on coming through official channels until I told her that if she sent one more assistant to ask what I meant by "the shelf groans like a Victorian ghost," I would haunt her headquarters. She arrived the next morning in boots, hair tied low, ready to carry boxes. "You cannot carry that," I said when she reached for a crate of 19th century poetry. "I have carried companies through worse. Companies do not have cracked spines. Some do." I tried not to smile. Failed. She noticed, and the room seemed briefly less dusty. Working beside Adrienne was infuriating. She was precise about everything. Humidity levels, glove use, donor labels, coffee temperatures, emotional boundaries. She read contracts like other people read weather. She arranged books alphabetically, then by acquisition date. Then, when I argued, by what she called the shop's native chaos. She never touched me by accident. If the aisle was too narrow, she waited. If I climbed a ladder, she stood nearby but did not hover. If I forgot lunch, she placed food on the counter with a receipt showing she had paid for it personally, not through the foundation, because apparently even sandwiches required ethical clarity. "You are impossible," I told her one afternoon while eating soup I had not requested. "You said that yesterday." "It has become more true." "You dislike mushrooms." I stared at the soup. No mushrooms. "How do you know that?" "The night you confronted Juliet, you moved every mushroom tartlet to the left side of your plate. You remember my plate from the worst night of my life?" Adrienne looked at the box in her hands. "I remember many things I did not know how to repair." The words landed gently and hurt anyway. I stirred the soup. "You're doing that again." "What?" "Saying things that make me want to forgive you for failures you didn't fully commit." Her gaze lifted. "Do you want me to stop?" "No," I said too honestly. A bell saved us. June entered with a stack of flyers, and the expression of a woman who had been waiting years for romance to become organizationally inconvenient. "Interrupting tension, sorry. Actually not sorry. We have a problem." The problem was an article. Someone had leaked an old photograph of Adrienne at 24 with a woman I did not recognize, both of them laughing outside a university library. The headline suggested Adrienne's runaway wedding had been caused by long-standing indiscretions and questioned the foundation's partnership with my shop. My name appeared in the third paragraph, first as Juliet's former partner, then as Adrienne's new confidant, a word that sounded like it had taken its gloves off. Adrienne read it without expression. That frightened me more than anger would have. "Who is she?" I asked softly. Her name was Lenore. "Was?" "She's alive." A pause. "But we are not." I waited. Adrienne set the tablet down. She was the first woman I loved. We were young, and certain secrecy was the same as privacy. My father discovered us, threatened her scholarship, and offered her a fellowship overseas if she left quietly. I told myself letting her go was protection. She told me I had made cowardice elegant. June, blessedly, said nothing. I looked at Adrienne, at the line of her jaw. The old hurt folded with such discipline that most people would mistake it for indifference. "I'm sorry." She was right. That doesn't make what happened to you right. Adrienne's eyes shifted to mine, and for a moment I saw the woman beneath the executive, beneath the bride, beneath the cold eldest daughter carrying everyone else's weather. "No," she said, "it does not. The article should have pushed us apart. Instead, it became the first time Adrienne let me sit beside her without the excuse of work. We stayed after closing in the half-empty rare books room, surrounded by gaps on shelves and dust in the air. And she told me about Lenore, about her father, about the years she had spent becoming untouchable, because touch had once cost someone else too much. I told her about my mother, about losing the family library, about opening the shop, because I had needed proof that things could be loved after being handled by many hands. At some point, rain began again. Adrienne noticed me looking at it and said, "Weather follows you." "No, dramatic women do." Her mouth curved. "Fair." The almost smile made me reckless. "Were you in love with Juliet's idea of me?" She stilled. "What do you mean?" "You bought books anonymously. You came here in your memories. You watched my event. Maybe I'm just the shop, a quiet place, a rebellion in a cardigan." Adrienne turned toward me fully. "You are not a symbol, Clara. That sounds like a board statement. It is a boundary." Her voice was low. "I will not reduce you to what you represent to my escape. If I cannot tell the difference, I should not be near you. And can you?" Her eyes held mine. "Increasingly, that is the problem." The silence after that had a pulse. We were sitting too close on the floor, shoulders nearly touching, the green lamp making a small island of us in the half-dismantled room. I could have leaned in. She could have. Neither of us did. Finally, I whispered, "I don't want to be rescued by another veil." "Good," she said. "I don't want to rescue you." "What do you want?" Adrienne looked at my mouth once, briefly enough that I might have imagined it if my whole body had not noticed. "To be invited." I did not kiss her that night. I went upstairs, closed my door, and pressed my fingers to my lips like a teenager in a bad poem. But the next morning, I found a note tucked into the rare books ledger in Adrienne's severe handwriting. "Invitation remains your word." I kept it in the cash drawer behind the pennies. Spring arrived late and wet. The collaboration became a public success despite everyone's attempts to turn it into scandal. Patrons came to see the restored room and stayed to buy books. Students gathered in the poetry corner. Older women who had known my grandmother brought donations wrapped in brown paper. Adrienne's foundation hosted a reading series for queer writers who spoke without apology under the stained glass window, where Juliet had once tried to turn my humiliation into her honesty. The room changed, and so did I. I answered Sarah in April, not because I forgave her, but because silence had stopped feeling like power and started feeling like a locked door I was standing behind too. We met at a cafe that was not mine. She cried before the coffee arrived. "I was jealous of you," she said. "Not of Juliet, of how certain you seemed even when you were scared. She made me feel like I could become the person people looked at." "And I became what?" I asked. Her face crumpled. "The person we stepped over." It was the first honest sentence she had given me. It was not enough to rebuild us. It was enough to stop carrying the fantasy that she did not know. When I told Adrienne, she listened from the floor behind the counter while applying tiny labels to archival boxes. "Do you want your friendship back?" she asked. "No." "Do you want to punish her?" "Less than I did." That is a kind of freedom. I watched her hands, capable hands, careful hands, no rings. "Do you ever want Lenore back?" Adrienne did not look up. "No, I want the courage I did not have with her. And now? Her fingers paused on the label. Now I am trying not to mistake restraint for fear. My heart stumbled. Is that what this is? She looked up then, gray eyes steady and vulnerable in a way that still startled me. Sometimes it is respect. Sometimes it is cowardice wearing respect's coat. Adrienne. Yes? I'm inviting you. She did not move. To what? I almost laughed at the control in her voice, the way she made even hope stand at attention. I crossed the room slowly, every floorboard sounding louder than it should. She rose when I reached her, not stepping closer, not stepping back. Outside, daylight leaned through the front windows. The shop was open technically. June had gone to the post office mercifully. The bell could ring at any moment. I touched Adrienne's sleeve. To kiss me. Her breath changed. Not much. Enough. Are you certain? No, but I am choosing. Something flickered across her face. Pain, relief, want, terror. Then she lifted one hand to the side of my face and stopped a breath away. I closed the distance. The kiss was not dramatic at first. It was careful, almost painfully so. Her mouth warm and restrained against mine, her fingers barely touching my cheek. But the care was its own kind of heat. She kissed like someone reading a rare page with clean hands, reverent and afraid of damage. I slid my hand to her waist, felt the sharp inhale she tried to hide, and the restraint thinned. Not broke. Adrienne never broke. She yielded by degrees, allowing want to enter the room like a truth that had been knocking for months. When we pulled apart, the bell over the front door rang. June stepped in, holding a postal receipt, took one look at us and said, "Finally," then walked straight back out. I hid my face against Adrienne's shoulder and laughed until I nearly cried. Adrienne's hand rested at my back, steady and warm. Your assistant is efficient. She has suffered. So have we. Yes, I said, lifting my face, but she will be louder about it. The kiss did not make anything simple. That was important. Adrienne was still a veil. Juliet was still her sister. The board still watched the foundation with knives hidden in polite emails. People still wrote articles. Customers still whispered. But after the first kiss, the truth had somewhere to stand. We made rules because both of us had been harmed by people who called desire destiny and let it excuse laziness. No foundation decisions through me. No shop decisions through her. No gifts I could not refuse. No public appearances without discussion. No hiding, but no feeding gossip simply because it was hungry. Adrienne wrote the rules in a notebook. I added one at the bottom. Tea required after all arguments. She read it, then looked at me. That is not governance. It is civilization. She signed beneath it. Juliet found out, of course. Families like hers had emotional surveillance disguised as concern. She came to the grand opening of the restored rare books room in a white suit, Sarah not beside her this time. The room was full. Writers, donors, neighbors, reporters. June's mother loudly praising the cookies. Adrienne standing near the back in dark blue with her hands loosely clasped, and every eye in the room pretending not to look at her. Juliet waited until after my speech. Again, I almost admired the symmetry. She approached while I stood near the glass case displaying a first edition of a novel about a woman who refused to marry the man chosen for her. Subtlety had abandoned me. "Clara," she said, "may we speak?" No. Her lips pressed together. Publicly, then. Your favorite format. A few people nearby went quiet. Adrienne's gaze moved to us, but she did not step forward. I felt her attention like a hand at my spine without being touched. Juliet's voice stayed soft. I know you think this is some kind of victory. I think this is my workplace. You're using her to hurt me. That was so small, so revealing, that for a moment I felt sad. Not for the woman she had been to me, but for the person trapped inside the belief that every love in the room was a mirror angled toward her. Juliet, your sister ran from a wedding before I knew she needed somewhere to sleep. I rebuilt my shop because it deserved rebuilding. Whatever Adrian and I are is not about you. Her eyes flashed at Adrian's name in my mouth. She will choose the family when it matters. Behind us, Adrian spoke. No. One syllable. Calm. The room stilled. Adrian approached, not in front of me, but beside me, always beside. I chose the family for years when it mattered. It made the family worse. Juliet's face twisted. Mother says you're humiliating us. Adrian's expression did not change. Mother believes consequences are humiliation when they happen to veils. You don't understand what this looks like. I understand exactly what it looks like, Adrian said. It looks like a woman you hurt continuing to live without asking your permission. Juliet turned to me. And Sarah? Did you discard her too? No, I said. She betrayed me. I survived. Those are different stories. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I had known her, Juliet seemed to have no elegant way to hold the room. She left before she could lose more of it. I thought I would feel triumph. I felt something quieter, a door closing without a slam. After the guests left and June took the leftover cookies home in 3 morally questionable tote bags, Adrian and I stood in the restored room alone. The shelves gleamed. The green lamp had been polished. The velvet chair had been reupholstered but still sagged slightly on the left because I insisted some flaws were structural character. Adrian touched the back of the chair. I slept very badly here, she said. You slept worse upstairs. You kept waking up. You noticed? You were a runaway bride in my apartment. I was alert. She looked at me. I was not only running from the wedding. I know. I was running from the version of myself that could have gone through with it. I leaned against the glass case. Did you outrun her? No. Adrian stepped closer. I brought her here. You made her tea. You were rude to her. It helped. I smiled. Any time. Her hand lifted, then paused, asking without words. I nodded. She touched my waist, gentle, grounding. The air between us warmed with the kind of desire that had learned patience without losing fire. I love you, she said. It was not dramatic. No rain, no headlines, no wedding dress. Just Adrian Vale standing in my bookshop after closing, saying something she had once built a whole life to avoid. I had thought love would frighten me after Juliet. I thought the words would feel like a trap door. Instead, they felt like a book opening to a page I had once been afraid to turn. I love you too, I said. Her eyes closed briefly. When she opened them, the cold woman everyone feared looked stunned by being held in truth. I kissed her then, not carefully at first, not gently enough to be symbolic. She made a small sound against my mouth, one that belonged to no boardroom and no family duty, and for a while the shop became only warmth, shelves, breath, her hand at my back, my fingers in her hair, the green lamp burning like a little moon over the rare books. When we finally stopped, my forehead rested against hers. I should tell you something, I said. That sounds ominous. It is. I still have the wedding dress. Adrian went still. What? You left it upstairs. In a garment bag. I was going to return it, but then your mother sent 3 lawyers and I panicked. For 3 full seconds, Adrian only stared. Then she laughed so hard she had to sit in the velvet chair. I laughed too, because the dress had been hanging in my closet like the ghost of a woman who had refused a life and accidentally found mine. We did return it eventually, though not to the family. Adrian donated the dress anonymously to a theater program for queer youth, where a student later cut it into costumes for a play about runaway saints. She kept one small piece of lace, folded inside the copy of the novel from my display case. I kept the note that said, "Invitation remains your word." Months later, When summer rain softened the city, Adrian came to the shop after closing with no driver and no assistant, carrying takeout and wearing jeans as if she had been dared by a more human version of herself. June had already gone. The rare books room glowed softly. I was shelving returns, barefoot because my shoes had betrayed me around 6. "You're late," I said. "I was choosing dessert." That is not a defense. It is when dessert is complicated. She set the bag down, then came toward me. I watched her move through the aisles with the ease of someone who no longer felt like an intruder in softness. She stopped in front of me and held out a small key. "What is that?" I asked. "The back door. Recut. Legally this time." My throat tightened before I could make a joke. "Adrienne, you do not have to give it to me," she said quickly. "I had it made because the old lock was embarrassing, and because I wanted to ask rather than assume." She placed the key in my palm. "You decide who has it." I looked at the key, then at the woman who had once arrived through that door in a ruined wedding dress, carrying the wreckage of everyone's expectations. "You know," I said, "the first time you came through that door, you were the last thing I needed." "Yes." "And somehow still exactly what happened." Her mouth softened. "That is not the same as being wanted." "No," I agreed. Then I closed her fingers around the key. "This is." She did not cry. Adrienne rarely did, but something in her face loosened, and that was enough. I kissed her in the aisle between poetry and travel, and outside, rain tapped the windows without malice. I used to believe my story broke the night Juliet kissed Syrah beneath my stained glass window. I thought everyone had watched me become smaller. But stories do not end because someone cruel chooses the wrong audience. Sometimes they wait, stubborn and half-shelved, for the next reader brave enough to pick them up gently. Sometimes a bride runs from a life that would have buried her, finds the one unlocked door in the city, and falls asleep among poems. Sometimes the woman you thought belonged to the family that ruined you becomes the person who teaches you that love can knock, wait, and enter only when invited. After closing, the bent page belonged to Rain, Lamplight, and us. Adrienne locked the back door with her new key. I turned off the front sign. Upstairs, tea waited on the stove, and the bed was no longer a place borrowed in crisis, but chosen in peace. She reached for my hand on the stairs, not to lead, not to claim, but to ask whether I was coming. I was. Loving Adrienne did not make the city kinder. If anything, it made the city more interested. Women who had never bought a book in their lives came in pretending to browse cookbooks while watching the stairs for signs that Adrienne had spent the night. Reporters called the shop a literary refuge, a scandal address, a romantic hideaway, and once, in a phrase June printed and taped above the kettle, a lesbian weather event. Adrienne offered to have her lawyers handle every article. I told her if she sent one more cease and desist about my love life, I would start invoicing Vale House for emotional labor. She asked for my hourly rate with such seriousness that I threw a pencil at her. The difficulty was not the gossip. Gossip had been there since Juliet. The difficulty was learning how to be loved by a woman who could solve almost any practical problem except the one living inside herself. Adrienne could restructure a foundation budget before breakfast. She could silence a boardroom with one look. She could arrange emergency repairs to my roof without waking me, which led to our first real argument after I found 6 contractors measuring the skylight while I was still in pajamas. "You cannot just fix things while I'm asleep," I snapped, standing in the kitchen with my hair wild and my robe tied badly. Adrienne stood on the opposite side of the table, still in her black coat, face carefully blank, in the way I was beginning to recognize as fear pretending to be poise. The leak was worsening. "So you decided my roof was your jurisdiction?" "No. I decided water damage was urgent." "Adrienne." Her jaw tightened. I did not intend to overstep. "That doesn't mean you didn't." The room went very quiet. Outside, one of the contractors dropped a ladder with a crash that made both of us flinch. Adrienne looked toward the window, then back at me. "I am used to being useful before anyone asks," she said. "In my family, if I waited for permission, the damage spread. I am not your family's damage." "No," she said at once. "You are not." My anger softened, but I did not let it vanish just because she looked wounded. That was another lesson I was learning. Tenderness did not require surrendering the boundary that made tenderness safe. "Ask me next time," she nodded. "I will. And pay me rent for the emotional shock of seeing men with drills before coffee." That surprised a reluctant breath of laughter from her. "Name your price." "Breakfast, and you make the tea." "I am terrible at tea." "I know. I'm choosing growth for both of us." She made terrible tea. I drank it anyway. In late summer, Adrienne finally asked me to come to Vale House. Not the headquarters, not the foundation office, but the family house on the water, the one in society photographs with its white columns and old stone terraces. She asked like she was inviting me into a storm shelter during the storm, rather than after it. Her mother had requested dinner. Juliet would be there. I almost said no before Adrienne finished the sentence. "You can refuse," she said. "You do not owe them your presence." "Do you want me there?" The question seemed to trouble her more than the dinner. "Yes," she said finally, "but wanting is not asking." "It can be if you let me answer." Her eyes warmed. "Will you come with me?" So I went. Not because I wanted to impress the Vales. Not because I wanted to prove I belonged at that long, shining table with its silver knives and portraits of dead men who looked irritated by future women. I went because Adrienne's hand was steady in mine when we stepped through the front doors, and for once, I wanted to be the one beside her when her old life tried to make her smaller. Juliet was there in black, elegant and restless. Syrah was not. Their story had ended badly, I had heard, though not loudly enough to satisfy the uglier part of me. Adrienne's mother, Celia Vale, greeted me as if I were a petition she had already decided to deny. She was beautiful in the preserved way of old money, every pearl and pale hair arranged with military intention. "Miss Rowe," she said, "you have caused us considerable upheaval." I felt Adrienne inhale beside me. I squeezed her hand once before she could speak. "Mrs. Vale, your daughter arrived in my bookshop in a wedding dress after fleeing an altar. I mostly made tea." Celia's eyes narrowed. Juliet looked away, and Adrienne's thumb moved over my knuckle, a tiny private astonishment. Dinner was exactly as pleasant as surgery without anesthesia. Celia spoke of legacy, optics, obligations, family names. Juliet made one brittle remark about my talent for finding powerful patrons. Adrienne's face grew colder with every course until the room felt refrigerated. I realized then that coldness had been the language this house taught her first, the only language they had reliably understood. But I had not come all that way to watch her speak it alone. When dessert arrived untouched, I set down my spoon. "I think you all keep mistaking Adrienne's happiness for rebellion because obedience made you comfortable." Celia looked at me as if the cutlery had begun offering opinions. "This is a family matter." "No," I said. "It became my matter when your family turned my shop into a stage for its mistakes." Juliet's cheeks colored. Adrienne turned her head toward me slowly. "I loved Juliet," I continued, and the room hated the simplicity of it. I trusted Sarah. "I lost both in public. Adrienne did not cause that. She did not buy my forgiveness or my loyalty. She showed up tired, frightened, and honest in a way nobody else in this house seems to value unless it serves a statement." I looked at Celia then. "You call her duty when she sacrifices herself, and scandal when she stops. That is not family. That is extraction." For a long moment, nobody spoke. I expected Adrienne to be angry with me for saying too much. Instead, when I glanced at her, there were tears in her eyes, not falling. Adrienne even cried with discipline. But they were there. Celia folded her napkin. "You are very direct." I sell used books for a living. I cannot afford subtext at dinner. Adrian made a sound that might have been a laugh if her throat had not been tight. Juliet stared at her sister as if seeing something she had missed for years. We left before coffee. In the car, Adrian was silent until the house disappeared behind the trees. I should apologize, I said. No. Her voice was rough. No one has ever defended me in that house without wanting something from me. I want something. She looked at me. I want you to stop going back alone. The tears finally slipped then, 2 clean lines down the face of a woman most of the city believed incapable of being hurt. I did not wipe them away. I held her hand in the dark car and let her have the dignity of being sad without managing my reaction to it. Autumn brought the first night we closed the shop together as if we had done it all our lives. Adrian counted the till badly, because numbers outside a balance sheet apparently bored her. I shelved returns. June had left early with a smug warning that she was not responsible for anything romantic that happened near the mystery section. Rain tapped the glass. The green lamp glowed in the rare books room. A new sign hung by the back door, hand-painted by one of the students from our reading series. Stories continue after closing. Adrian stood beneath it, looking up. That is inaccurate. Some stories behave responsibly and end at reasonable hours. Name one, she considered. Instruction manuals. Even those have appendices. I came to stand beside her. The shop smelled of dust, cinnamon from the bakery next door, and the faint vanilla scent of old paper. Adrian turned the key in the lock, then held it out to me. I did not take it. Instead, I covered her hand with mine. You keep it tonight, I said. Her expression softened into something that still felt rare, no matter how often I earned it. Are you sure? Yes, but don't let it go to your head. It's a key, not a crown. I have never wanted a crown. No? She looked around my crooked, beloved shop, at the shelves that leaned, the chair that sagged, the window where pain had once stood in public, and love had later refused to hide. Then she looked at me. No, she said. I wanted a door I was allowed to enter. I kissed her there, under the sign, with the rain keeping time and the city moving beyond the glass. There was no audience, no scandal, no white dress, no family name pressing between us. Just Adrian's hand at my waist, my fingers against the pulse in her throat, and the quiet knowledge that everything between us had been asked for, answered, and chosen. When we went upstairs, the bed was warm from the radiator and the kettle was already beginning to sigh. Adrian paused in the doorway like she still remembered the first night, when she had slept there as a fugitive from a life that wanted to keep her. I touched the back of her hand. You are not borrowing shelter anymore, I said. Her eyes met mine. No. What are you doing? Coming home, she said, and this time, she did not ask if she was allowed. She already knew the answer because I had given it freely, again and again, in keys and tea and arguments and kisses, and every ordinary morning after the dramatic nights were over.